Now then, Andy, you've got us the first question via an email.
And it's a goodie.
Ooh.
It's from a friend of the Ramble, Paul, on email, as you say. Sunday, 19th of May, 2024. That's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Will mark the end of an era at Anfield as Jurgen Norbert Klopp puts away the whitening toothpaste, hangs his cap up and rides off into the sunset, leaving behind a decent collection of trophies and fond memories for the fans and players who've enjoyed his time at Liverpool. For fans of Liverpool, his legacy will be undeniable, rated as one of the best to manage in the Premier League. But others will argue that he hasn't won enough to warrant that status. The conversation is complicated slightly by the fact that Klopp's tenure has coincided with his team being tied up in a head-to-head battle at one of the richest clubs in European football history while they have been at their peak. What do you think Klopp's lasting legacy will be? Charismatic bridesmaid or one of the top 3 to 5 managers to ever manage in the English Premier League? Or realistically, is it impossible to properly assess his true standing until the 115 charges are finally resolved and any sanctions imposed, so sometime in 2033?
Good question, though.
Very good question.
Really good question. Look, I think the day before Klopp manages Liverpool for the final time, certainly for this stint, because who knows what the future holds, it is important to applaud and respect his impact and the legacy he leaves and what he's been able to deliver for Liverpool. It's been absolutely huge. I totally understand why Liverpool consider him among their best. Champions League win, which is a tournament that Liverpool kind of judge themselves on. They've earned the right to be able to do that. Delivering the Premier League back to Anfield after such a long time is probably the headline kind of achievement he's had, and that's massive for them because it was a source of great embarrassment, and rightly so, that a club the size of Liverpool had gone so long without winning the Premier League. It became a running joke. I mean, it was embarrassing for them, and he's able to do that and get over that hump, and it was very, very tough for them to do that, particularly in a very competitive Premier League era. The problem is, I think I fall down the side of the fence where I say a hugely impactful manager for his charisma and his personality and some of his achievements in the Premier League, but a much bigger impact for Liverpool themselves than perhaps the Premier League more broadly. Do
you think you can separate the two?
I think so, because I think there are just other managers in the Premier League era that have achieved an awful lot more than he has in the Premier League, and the question was about the Premier League. So if I was going to say, the top 3 managers since the inception of the Premier League, for me, they are Ferguson, Wenger, and Guardiola.
Not Mourinho.
I would say next is Mourinho, probably alongside Klopp.
Right.
In that second tier below those. The reason for that...
That's your 5, isn't it? I suppose there's a difference if we go back and drill into the question that Paul's posed us. Top 3 to 5 managers, there's a massive difference between, as you've underlined there, top 3 and top 5.
Definitely. 100%. So I would say he probably sneaks into the top 5. Ferguson, Guardiola, Wenger, Mourinho, Klopp. The problem is, whether we like it or not, and we can explore this in a bit more detail if you want to, he's only won 1 Premier League title. I mean, the impact Wenger's had, the impact Guardiola's had, and of course Ferguson stands head and shoulders above all of them, means that even Mourinho, who fits underneath, he's won 3. Klopp's only won 1.
When you said he's only won 1 Premier League title, Andy and I both shot each other a look.
We did, didn't we?
As if to say, a little bit more context needed.
There is context needed, but it's context that we don't have the detail of at this moment.
Well, but we do have that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
They've come up against possibly the greatest side to have ever played in the Premier League.
And one of the greatest managers of all time, without a shadow of a doubt, in Guardiola. I mean, you talk about who's made
That's
the biggest...
why he's in the top 3.
Which to me, it is difficult to compare because, I mean, if you think about Ferguson's Manchester United, they set the pace in the Premier League. They were the ones that really sort of showed everybody, how to win and keep winning. But in terms of impact and legacy and so on, I think Guardiola will be it'll be greater because of the style of play and just how to do things, really.
That's definitely a big part of it.
And Klopp has gone toe-to-toe with Manchester City and with Pep Guardiola, and I think that The fact that they kept pace with them and just missed out. And I think that's it. That winning is obviously very, very, very important, but it is not the only thing that we kind of rate it on. Because you could say, well, he's won the same amount of Premier League titles as Antonio Conte, but yeah, I mean, and fair play to Conte,
Or
but
Claudio Ranieri.
Claudio Ranieri.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Claudio Ranieri, I'd say has more of a footprint on the Premier League than Conte. I might argue, because obviously he was, part of Chelsea, but that's off the.
But the context, just to throw a bit of context back.
But it's to do with legacy.
I understand that, and before you move on, I really want to throw a bit of context back at you. I did consider that when I thought about who the most.
I'm sure you did.
The reason I would have Ferguson at the top is because he is synonymous with the first, however many years, 15 years of maybe even longer of the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could definitely make an argument that Guardiola's had a bigger impact on football in general, of which, of course, the Premier League is a big part, than Ferguson. But eventually, I had Ferguson up as my number one, chiefly because when all's said and done, Alex Ferguson's won more Premier League titles than Guardiola, Wenger, Mourinho put together. You know, it's head and shoulders stuff.
Yeah. Well,
so when you talk about Premier League
I don't think
managers,
anyone's going to argue if you have Ferguson as number one.
I just think fair enough. It may be a bit unlucky that he's come along at the time he's come along, Klopp, and maybe what will shake out with the Guardiola Man City thing may shake out. And we're talking about it in euphemistic terms, just chiefly because we have to, and we don't know the detail, and the legal stuff is difficult. So we have to talk about it in a certain way. But at the moment, he's won one Premier League title. It's massive that he brought the Premier League back to Liverpool in the circumstances he did after so long, given the competition. No one's denying that. It's hard to say that he's had a bigger impact on the Premier League than Wenger. I think the Wenger Premier League influence is absolutely gigantic, given how he basically almost entirely revolutionised top-level athletes in football in this country.
Again, no one would argue that.
You have to have him in there. And I personally believe, regardless of all the chutney, Guardiola's a better manager than Klopp. That's my opinion.
So the conversation.
So that's the three.
The conversation is in two parts, though. The question, the first question is, what do you think Klopp's lasting legacy will be? And obviously you're right, because Paul says, of the top 3 to 5 managers who have ever played in the English Premier League, is he one of them? So you're absolutely right to kind
he's there or close. I think we can all agree.
He's part of the
on
conversation,
that.
right?
Definitely. I think with Klopp, it's very different. You know, he takes over Liverpool at a very different time to say when Ferguson takes over Manchester United. You start comparing all that kind of stuff. But in terms of his legacy at Liverpool will be one of the greats. A wise person once said, people don't remember what people say to them. You remember how they made you feel. And in the spirit of that, what did Klopp make those Liverpool supporters feel? He made them feel on top of the world. And he also made supporters of other teams incredibly envious that he was their manager, and awestruck when Klopp came to town, and very wary of what him and his teams could do. They played some of the best football we've seen. He coined the term, didn't he? Heavy metal football. Yeah. I say the term. I don't think anybody else used it, but that's what he said at Borussia Dortmund. And it was that Liverpool, I think, no one ever called them boring. With Manchester City, and I know Manchester City fans would hate this, and I understand why they would hate this, and I'm not saying this, but some people say, well, under Guardiola, the football can be a bit boring because it can, you just hammer teams 5 or 6-0. Well, I'm pretty sure the supporters of those teams...
Isn't it the lack of jeopardy rather than the football itself?
Quite possibly, Andy.
But then again,
no one would ever say a Jurgen Klopp team is boring.
Then again, if we went back to Guardiola at Barcelona, there are some people who called that football.
No, there was. I don't agree with that, but I'm saying that has never been levelled at Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. Klopp was a success at Borussia Dortmund, but he did lose 3 finals in the German Cup and the Champions League, and there was a bit of a thing that he couldn't quite do it in the finals. And obviously, the first season Liverpool, he loses the Europa League final. He put that to bed. I think it's fair to say at Liverpool, with the League Cup wins, with the FA Cup win and the Champions League win, although they lost more finals in the Champions League than they won. But the fact is, Liverpool, them and Man City, for a lot of people at a certain period of time, were the 2 best teams in Europe.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that season when they went for the quadruple, it was stunning. It was a shame the way it ended for them, because it did sort of tail off a bit. And I think if they'd have won that Champions League final, I think we would maybe think slightly more favourably because they should have won that final, even though they were running out of steam.
Yeah, and I think if you were to say, if you cross that 5-year period as it was, where City win 4 of them and Liverpool win 1, I'm of the opinion that it would be a much more accurate reflection of the dominance of those two teams in the period if it had been 3-2 either way, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
At one point, Liverpool won something like 98 points and didn't win the league.
Exactly.
Right? So I get all that,
Yeah.
and I also get all the context around cup competitions and everything else and how. But the question's not about his impact in England. It's about his impact on the Premier League.
Or is it a legacy in general as well?
Yeah, it is.
Well, legacy in general, I think the other thing I'd point to is that his style of play, while really exciting and really enthusiastic and amazingly kind of entertaining, it hasn't. I don't think it's something that's become synonymous with lots of teams doing it the way Guardiola's football has. Partly because it's quite much harder to do because you're talking about high impact, pressing up the pitch, counter pressing,
Which has worn his team out at points.
and it wears teams out. And actually, it's not only that. If you, as I said to you guys before, if you go and watch Gosport Borough, they'll play in a way that makes it look like they want to play the way Guardiola thinks football should be played.
Indeed.
Teams at that level can't do a gegenpress. It's too hard.
Right. But I think with Klopp, though, we know that Mourinho is the sort of anti-Guardiola, anti-Barcelona, if you like, and that's why he set up his stall. But Jurgen Klopp's style of play is much more effective against Guardiola's style of play. We've seen Liverpool before cut through Man City
and it's
in a way.
He's beaten Man City 11 times as a manager.
And it's much more Premier League friendly. For want of a better word. I think there are a lot more cultural touchstones between Klopp and the Premier League than Guardiola in the Premier League.
Well, he said that he kind of repackaged the parts of the old great Liverpool sides and English football in the 70s and 80s. He said, I don't know why they kind of abandoned some
it's
of
the
their
Stones
principles.
selling blues back to the Americans.
A bit like that.
Yeah,
exactly. And
Nice.
and that's kind of what he's done. So in terms of his legacy, it's a tricky one with legacy because Guardiola is the ultimate example of, when we see teams playing out the back and all that kind of stuff, you see what he's done. And obviously those who have gone before him in that style of play and total football and blah, blah, blah. Whereas with Klopp, you think, what will the legacy be? Well, I think his will be more of an Alex Ferguson type of legacy rather than Guardiola, because I think with Guardiola, again, there's so few examples of that, just because that, of course, there would be so few. But with Ferguson, you think of an absolute titan of the game, a winner, a guy whose teams would play for him. They would be so difficult to beat. They would be really effective, score goals, be entertaining, a huge personality. Someone who, when he walked into a room, you couldn't take your eyes off him. Klopp, I think, would probably be a little bit more jovial than Ferguson.
I think it's a good comparison.
But I think
he's got that hairdryer side to him.
Oh, he does, but I think that's more the legacy.
That's a huge part of
I think
it.
the legacy is more about the sort of individual charisma, all that kind of stuff, which another manager can't recreate what he does.
Yeah, and the personality, I think, is a massive part of it when you put it in a Premier League context.
Yeah.
Because for us, we're only just coming into, as a football culture, really talking about tactics in any sort of meaningful way.
It wasn't as much of a
really,
conversation on the Ferguson's era, was it?
No, it wasn't. And I think when you look at that, sort of Klopp almost unites the two eras of the Premier League in that sense, doesn't he? The personality and the greater emphasis on tactical discussion. But I think because of Klopp's personality and because of how overwhelming it is in a way, we can almost overlook that tactically he's learnt a lot on the job. He's improved as a coach immeasurably since he's arrived in the Premier League. A couple of problems that he arrived with from Dortmund that kind of helped to usher him out of Dortmund, he worked out while he was there. I think you took a look at the low ebb that he took over Liverpool at. I think the way that he's constantly recovered from setbacks. I think in this era of post Ronaldo and Messi, and managerially or coaching wise post Guardiola, we can think that perfection is the only desirable thing. Whereas actually that's not necessarily desirable or realistic, is it? Whereas the fact is, Liverpool, and if we're talking about it in not just a Liverpool context, but a Premier League context, Liverpool being big and being one of the biggest teams in the Premier League is a massive asset to the Premier League worldwide.
Yeah, it kind of feels right as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's absolutely huge. And before Klopp arrived, they were not a former big club, but a former big team who had a good season, like once every 2 or 3. Never mind them not having won the league for ages. You can think of the one season they came close under Rodgers, the season they came close under Benitez.
Yeah.
but
They
that's
lost like 2 games.
But
that
even when
season.
they
that's
won
not enough.
even
is
when they
it?
won the Champions League against Milan in that famous final, it was still like an underdog, and we battled
Big
back,
time.
and we've nicked it off them kind of.
It wasn't. It wasn't traditional Liverpool greatness.
no one was saying. No one
was
were
it?
arguing Liverpool were the best team in Europe that season.
No, certainly
No
not.
way.
No, and
So I think that's the extraordinary thing about Klopp, that he imposes his will, like Guardiola has imposed his will on City. Klopp imposes his will and his style on Liverpool whilst bringing out the best of their tradition, which I think is something
I think
that's
that-
really noteworthy.
Yeah.
So I think, as Marcus pointed out earlier, the two separate questions that were asked by Paul, the legacy question, which I think Andy's done a brilliant job of answering there, and I would completely agree with that. And it's not for me to say how important he's been to Liverpool, for example, anyway, but I totally agree with what he's saying. On the top 3 or 5 point, there's just no room for him in the top 3. It doesn't mean he's not amazing. And I think the criticism leveled at the take I made earlier about, oh, well, he's up against this and he's up against that. Well, Wenger was up against quite a lot. Wenger was up against the manager who won.
Yeah, let's not forget that United Arsenal rivalry, which was unbelievable.
Wenger managed to win 3 titles in an era where United was so dominant, and the actual era went on for twice as long as.
yeah, but
in
the
a way-
financial landscape would change. I
in
take
a
your
way,
point.
that's comparable to Klopp and Guardiola, isn't it?
Well,
in a
yeah, yeah. I mean, one can argue about top 3 or top 5. He's in the conversation, and rightly so. And I think that about his legacy, if I just could add, I think that we talked about Guardiola's legacy will be the tactics and all. I think Klopp's legacy is how he made people feel.
Totally.
And being that statesman of the game, of the club. Evertonians, but obviously not the blue half of Liverpool, but they feel almost like the city.
Yeah.
A city which has been maligned at times over the years and so on. And I think that it's just the sheer pride.
But that's it. The Premier League is about personalities.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about Ferguson, whether we're talking about Wenger, whether we're talking about Mourinho, or whether we're talking about Klopp, that is a huge part of it.
I would add as well, just to finish, that it's the weekend that he's leaving Liverpool, and we don't want to come across as being like nitpicky or churlish about it. I'm very, very glad he managed in the Premier League. I've had unimaginable enjoyment watching his teams at times, and I think he's been a real asset to the game in this country, and I'll be sad to see him go, and I hope he comes back, because he's been absolutely amazing for loads of different reasons. And yeah, look, he'll be his teams will be compared to Guardiola's City for all the obvious reasons, but he stands on his own 2 feet, his own personality, his own kind of achievements, and his own way of playing the game, which is absolutely fantastic to watch. And sometimes when he would get a little bit upset about playing a game early in the day or be a bad loser, you kind of jump on his back on this show and talking about him, taking the piss out of him. But actually, it's all in good jest, and I think once he's gone, we'll really miss him.
Yeah. Better to have
Loved
and clopped than never to have.
And also, sorry about that stuff yesterday about him having to knob out all the time. Like that was probably a bit disrespectful on his retirement weekend.
It was our Friday as well. We shall miss you, Jurgen. But we won't miss you all, because we've got another half of the mailbag. See you in a moment. Welcome back to the Football Ramble mailbag, everybody. Right, this from James J on the Discord. With all the chat about Spurs and their tin pottery this week, if your team had a chance to throw a game, we're not saying Spurs did that, to screw a rival out of a trophy, would you genuinely want your team to lose? Andy Brassel, let's say MK Dons. MK Dons.
You have to, out of respect, you have to just call them Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes, Wimbledon.
No, they need to keep the Dons. It's the badge of shame that they need to wear
but you
forever.
only refer to them as Milton Keynes.
Okay, Andy,
Yeah, sure.
Andy,
Yeah, that's
Andy,
what I'm saying.
But I refer to PSG as Paris.
Andy,
Okay,
Andy.
nice.
You've answered my question.
Yeah, well, you know what you feel.
No, but
No, give him a scenario. No, Andy first. Marcus, give Andy
me the scenario.
Yeah.
So AFC Wimbledon. So obviously it would have to be a football league kind of scenario. We're not going to. I mean, it's a league scenario. It doesn't matter. AFC Wimbledon, your beloved AFC Wimbledon, are playing a team
Yes.
who, if they beat MK Dons, say stop them from getting promoted automatically, right? And they would have to be dragged down into the playoffs, and we'll assume
All bets are off.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And AFC Wimbledon are playing a side who just need to win to make sure MK Dons don't automatically qualify. And it's at Wimbledon, AFC's ground. And AFC Wimbledon are thinking, we could, we've got nothing to play for. We're mid-table. We can't go up a place. We can't go down a place.
No. We're already promoted.
We're already
We've won
promoted.
the league. Easy.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whichever you prefer.
Yeah. Look, I think this is a very easy question.
Watch Andy take the moral high
answer.
ground there. He has to take the moral high ground on everything because of the way he's been treated. He can't come down to the gutter with the rest of us.
Silly Andy. Every now and then, you've got to pop down to the gutter just to check in.
Yeah, sure, but this is maybe not the place. You know what? We kind of had this situation relatively recently. Not quite the same, but like, for example, there's always a duality in that situation because I sort of felt at the end of this season, say when MK were in the playoffs, well, obviously, I don't particularly want anything good for them and I don't want them to win or anything like that. There's a part of you that goes, if they go up, at least we don't have to play them anymore.
Yeah, but you've said this before.
Cope with all the bullshit around it.
But you did enjoy beating them this season.
It's quite a unique...
Totally. And also, I think Wimbledon as a club and a group of supporters have maybe got better at dealing with it just because it's a more frequent reality. And it turns out losing to them feels really shit.
Yeah. And it's almost, with Andy's case, it's almost an entirely unique situation as well.
Yeah.
Like for us, for people who support different clubs, it's different.
But if you're asking, would I want my team to deliberately lose to disadvantage them? Well, A, the moral high ground is very important to me, as we've established.
Especially in this studio.
Exactly. And B, no. And part of that is because, well, as you know, I don't live in London anymore, so I probably only get to go to about 8 games a season, something like that.
You've got a portfolio of properties all across the city, though.
Absolute baron he is. Slum landlord.
He doesn't, everybody.
No, he's a slum landlord. Get it right.
I actually look in my flat overlooking the car park. I watch all the games through binoculars. but I mean,
You go to the what's it called? The there. There's a as well, I think.
have they fucking paid for advertising?
There's loads of stuff there, man.
What are you doing?
Just saying, giving people a flavour of the area, that's all.
I don't think you need to.
Fair enough.
No, you really don't. I mean, that's not convincing
Rory,
anyone to
just bleep
go.
out
Is
the
it?
brands. There could be any shop. They won't know.
Yeah, I think the thing is, as someone who doesn't get to go all the time now, I want to see us win as often as possible. Like, winning doesn't mean everything to me. It's nice to win. I like the experience, but I definitely, if we want to win, I don't want us to chuck away the opportunity of doing that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not convinced.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer it?
Same scenario, Southampton, Portsmouth.
My position is and has always been, and this is to give you the context of where I'm answering this question from, the position I always take, is I want Portsmouth to win every game and I want Southampton to lose every game.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
I don't want Southampton to go out of business. I don't want them to
nearly
go through
fire sale.
Yeah. I'd like them to suffer the way Portsmouth have suffered, but I don't want them to get out of business. But so my position genuinely, I've thought about this a lot over the last week because of the Spurs thing, and you have to get your takes right on the show. You want to make sure you kind of give a balance and say what you really think. And I did imagine what it would be like in my situation. And my honest conclusion I came to is I would... So say if you transpose Portsmouth and Southampton into the Spurs-Arsenal scenario, exactly as it's been this season, I would still want Portsmouth to win. I wouldn't care that Southampton...
Really?
No, I just... The reason for it is, I'm not trying to sound kind of pious or anything like that. I thought about it a lot and I just came down to the situation that Portsmouth's a really proud club and I've supported them my whole life and they've got a load to credit them anyway. I understand that if Southampton were to win the Premier League, it would be massive. It would be like Leicester. I get all that, and we'd have to put up with all that. I kind of see that as my burden to have to suffer because they've deserved to do it. And it's nothing we can't control it, right? And I think what you do is if you start to throw things into doubt like that, and like you said already, and no one's suggesting Spurs were doing that. And I don't think they were doing that, and I don't think anyone would. But in terms of a thought experiment. I think it demeans you. I think it demeans you more than you achieve from it. And I think if Spurs were to go around...
You look small time.
Massively. And
really
if Spurs' biggest...
That's what's annoyed Postecoglou.
100%. And if Portsmouth's biggest talking point for the next however many years was that we managed to stop Southampton winning the league by mucking about... I'd just be ashamed of that. I'd be embarrassed of it. So I think I would obviously not want them to do well and I wouldn't want them to win anything and I'd be gutted if they did. And I'm happy to say that.
Yeah. The integrity of the club and the competition.
I don't think you can insert yourself into that as a fan of a rival club. I don't think you should.
No, I agree with you, and I think I think you've summed that up well. For me, the consolation is you've lost the game. Oh well, at least
treat it as a consolation.
Exactly. I think that's absolutely right. There have been one or two teams, and as you know, I always support British teams in Europe. But there has been
big Celtic guy.
I said I always support the British teams in Europe, but. There have been, on occasion, when a team, a British team that has been playing, and I've genuinely supported them, not like my own, but wanted them to win, and they've lost, and then I don't know, days, weeks later, maybe you hear some of the fans, blah, 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 and you kind of go, actually, it's probably for the best they lost. Do you know what I mean?
For everyone listening, he's talking about Chelsea.
I've never said any teams. I enjoyed their.
It is my opinion that you are talking about Chelsea. You don't have to confirm or deny it. That's just what I think.
Any frequent European competition qualifier.
Could be. I think you judge it all on its merits. I don't particularly think there's any. When I think about that, I mean, we're getting onto a different topic now, but very quickly, say you take Chelsea, for example. The idea that just because they're geographically located in West London means you should support them as a fellow British person is crazy. The owner,
not for me. I like
the owner isn't British. The manager isn't British. The players aren't British. Some of them are, but you know what I mean. It doesn't make any difference.
I'm old-fashioned like that.
Fair enough.
I am.
All right, what about this then to round us off from Mike on Instagram? It's a little fun one for us to end with. Which 3 managers would you most like to go for a pint with, and who would be the bottom 3?
Top one straight away, Diego Simeone round his house with him doing a massive barbecue.
Oh, that'd be great.
I mean, have you? I don't know
Also
if
quite frightening.
Well, I don't know about that.
It does say go for a pint with, so it does suggest the pub, Andy. I love that you've put a bit of colour on it, though.
Well, because if you've seen the Amazon series on Diego Simeone, it's amazing.
I haven't.
The barbecue that he has at his house, it's like you've got 8
given.
people staffing it sort of business.
Well, he's got the money.
His dad he certainly does. His dad is really sort of, classic dad, not that impressed by his achievements. But when he sees the barbecue, he's like, oh yeah, fair enough. You've done well there, son.
Put it in a currency I can understand.
Yeah.
I like that.
Your achievements got you that. Oh, bloody hell.
And he's so
Bloody hell.
incredibly charismatic as well.
And Herman Burgos would be there as well. He'd
They
be
pal
working the
still?
bar. He'd be working the bar.
Yeah, they stay in touch.
Have they fallen out?
Well, no, they just don't work together anymore.
Yeah, but they're pals, surely.
Herman Burgers, not Burgos.
Yes, exactly. You see, it writes itself. This.
Yeah.
I think that's a good one. I think he would be good company. I think staying in the same city. Come on, Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah.
Because what I think would be great about Carlo is he'd be happy to answer all of your questions.
You worried about the language barrier?
No, 'cause he
Does
speaks
Diego
English.
speak English?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I'd take Andy along.
Carlo's English isn't like, it's not amazing though, is it?
No, but isn't he married to a Canadian?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, so he would understand
So
everything.
maybe he just doesn't want to do it.
I just have to do a bit of an accent and talk about Bryan Adams now and then.
Yeah.
Which
you do anyway.
as you know what I can do. But no, I think with Carlo, I think that, again, he would answer all your questions. He'd be very interesting, but he wouldn't hog the chat. He wouldn't be all about... Obviously, I would want to make him...
He's not one of those guys who would talk about himself incessantly.
Exactly, which is why Louis van Gaal wouldn't be one of my favourites.
Yeah.
And also as well, what Wayne Rooney said about Van Gaal, he might be in the bottom 3. Van Gaal said after training, they would watch videos for about 90 minutes, they're all starving at this point, and then they would go in...
Football videos.
I sincerely
Or
hope
just
so.
like one of those peak compilations on YouTube of like epic fails.
And
Which could be the same thing, Man United.
this
really.
is a video of Tony Mowbray playing the sax for an hour and a half. Give him big applause.
Yeah.
So with Van Gaal, they would all go into the dining hall after, have dinner. He would be the last to get his food, but you couldn't leave until he finished his
Tedious.
three-course meal. So I think, at some point I would be... So I wouldn't want Van Gaal. As lovely as he is, Marcelo Bielsa, you're not getting any chat out of him.
No.
Antonio Conte, you wouldn't get any chat, and he'd probably hate me. He'd probably hate us all.
I'd say forget all the football geniuses. Like for the ones who would
Well,
be
not
in my
just the
bottom
genius,
3.
Andy.
Guardiola, no way.
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't want to have Alan Pardew because he wouldn't be interested in me. Let's be honest. He'd be
I've
interested
had a beer in the same vicinity as Alan Pardew, and I got no interest in taking it
he
further.
would not make eye contact with you once. Other people in there, definitely. I wouldn't want to go with Paul Jewell because he might, if there's a BMW outside, I'm in trouble.
I think you're probably safe, Mark.
Yeah.
You give yourself too much credit there, I think, mate.
I don't know. None of us, he's not as young as he was.
Yeah.
Paul Cook.
No, you get out of hand. I've got my.
It'd be like going for a drink with 3 different people because he'd have different voices at
He would
different
have
points in
Do
the
you know
night.
what? I wouldn't mind to go for a drink with Ian Holloway.
Yeah.
I think Ian Holloway.
I've been in the company of Ian Holloway. He's a very nice man.
Yeah, very nice man. I think there's a lot of depth there. What about Nathan Jones? Because if someone walked in you didn't like, you could point him and say, that guy says you've not got the best managerial record or whatever he said that time in Europe.
I've quite simply forgotten about the existence of Nathan Jones.
I said it for Jim's sake.
With Nathan Jones, I think you have like maybe half of your first drink, and by halfway through the first drink, you're trying to squeeze out of the window in the toilet.
Yeah,
but there is a kind of something very funny. I get a lot of amusement if you go out or if someone's there who's odd or full of themselves or whatever, and you just keep feeding them it just to see where it goes.
Well, my list was so the ones I wanted to go for a pint with were the great Gag, Gary O'Neill, just because
you love him, yeah.
Little connection there that he's not aware of. Sir Alex Ferguson, but that'd probably be a glass of wine, just because it'd just be amazing to chat to him for all the great days.
You're right.
And then, as we sit here right now, probably Big Ange actually.
Ange,
he looks like he knows his way around a beer.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you
Klopp
guys.
would be good as well.
Little look, yeah, it would be. He's doing an Erdinger beer advert at the moment, which is quite clearly meant for a German audience that they've just dubbed into English.
I mean, he advertises
everything in Germany, right?
Everything.
But the little peek behind the curtain for you here. I started putting together the list of managers that I wouldn't want to go for a drink with, and it became so monumentally long.
Yeah.
I thought there's no point including all these.
I had to rattle that. I didn't even say Mark McGee. Just again, or Neil Lennon, like any violent man.
Yeah. No,
Or Raji man. I shouldn't say violent.
Raji, that's a great striker. So I think that sums it up.
Yeah, lovely.
Cheers for watching another fantastic clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Make sure you click like on this video and subscribe to the channel, which means you will not miss a single upload.